big show for Deviance and Social Control Unit, and it's on crime and punishment. Crime is an act committed in violation of the law, but there are lots of laws that one can violate. There are over 4,000 classified as federal crimes, and then you need to add to that many thousands of laws that violate state and local laws. So there are literally thousands and thousands of things you could do to violate the law or commit a crime. According to the FBI, the violent crime rate fell 51% from 1993 to 2018. Also, according to the FBI, the property crime rate fell 54% during that same time span. However, public perceptions about crime don't align with the data. Consistently, 60% of Americans believe crime rate is higher than the previous year. However, there is a wide variety of crime rates by region, by state, by city, and by neighborhoods within cities. For example, Chicago has drawn attention the last couple of years for its soaring number of murders, but its actual murder rate, which means homicides per 100,000 people, is less than half that of St. Louis, Missouri. So we don't talk about the murders in St. Louis. There are more murders in Chicago, partly because, or especially because, there are so many more people in Chicago. You know, we talked a moment ago about crime rate dropping in the last 25 years, but you need to add to that most crimes are not reported to police. So maybe the crime rate really isn't dropping. It's just that most don't get reported. Most of the crimes that are reported to police, meanwhile, are not solved, at least based on an FBI measure known as the clearance rate. That's the share of cases each year that are closed or cleared through the arrest, charging, and referral of a suspect for prosecution. So somebody is arrested for and taken to court and prosecuted for a crime. Most crimes are not solved. And I don't want you to think of murder cases not being solved, because most are. But if there are lots and lots and lots of crimes against property, stuff gets stolen, cars are stolen, homes are broken into, no one is ever arrested for those crimes or any prosecution for it. Juvenile crime would be legal violations among those under the ages of 18. It's the third largest category of criminals in the United States. The criminal justice system is a system comprising institutions and processes responsible for enforcing criminal statutes. So law enforcement, police, court systems, the prisons or correction system. That's all part of the criminal justice system. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the ways to deal with the crime problem, or approaches to crime control. And the first one we'll mention is deterrence. That's when we try to discourage criminal acts by threatening punishment. This idea, if we make the punishment strong enough, people will choose not to commit a crime. Retribution is this idea of eye for an eye. That's punishment intended to make criminals pay for their acts. The best example of this would be like capital punishment. You murder someone, your life is taken in return. Incarceration is a method of protecting society from criminals by keeping them in prison. We deal with crime control by locking you up. You won't commit any more crime. And then there's rehabilitation, the process of changing or reforming a criminal through socialization. We want to re-socialize them. However, none of those approaches seem to work very well, because of this thing of recidivism, which is a repetition of or return to criminal behavior. And our rates of recidivism in the United States are consistently high. Many, many people, once they commit crimes and are prosecuted for crimes, they commit them again and again and again, no matter which approach is taken, except for, of course, capital punishment, which does put an end to it. But since most crimes that are committed are not murder, that really is taken off the table. So rehabilitation hasn't been terribly successful. Incarceration doesn't seem to lower the crime rate. We haven't been able to arrest our way out of crime. Retribution, it only seems to eliminate more crime when if you're put to death for murder. And it also doesn't work. The strong punishment hasn't been much of a deterrence, so that doesn't seem to lower the crime rate. However, according to the FBI, the crime rate is dropping, as I mentioned earlier, over the last 25 years. And yet the recidivism rate, the return of criminal behavior, is consistently high. People get into the criminal justice system and they stay in the criminal justice system. They tend to repeat crimes. And then we have to add on top of that the layer that most crime seems to go unreported. Other methods of dealing with antisocial behavior, one would be restitution. That's a punishment intended to make criminals pay money, monetary compensation, to make up for the financial damage caused by their acts. This is typically done through a civil suit. You were sued. Community service is another thing. So instead of or as part of a jail sentence, offenders are ordered to perform a certain number of hours of service beneficial to the community, like picking up trash along the highway. Education, or opportunities for people in prison to continue their education. Therapy, this is especially a common approach for drug offenders. That's this idea of drug court is, where rather than prison, you go to some kind of facility for drug rehabilitation therapy. Lots of approaches to crime control. The crime rate seems to have been dropping, and yet people think it hasn't dropped, and in reality, we're not exactly sure it has dropped because so many crimes are unreported. It's complicated, it's a little confusing, there's a lot of information there. Your big show on crime and punishment.